कोई भी पब्लिक स्पीकर पैदा नहीं होता, बनता है, संवरता है. It's one of the most important things that I've learned in my life. In my speech, I'll give you 2 stories, my real life stories, so they're not plagiarized, they're not there to inspire. It took me years to understand what the meaning of these stories was. It took me a long time to understand what I could make out of my life, what I could learn from my circumstances. So let's start with the first one. I'm in 7th grade, extremely shy, not as tall as this, don't know what to do when somebody tells you or talks in English. This is something that we face in Pakistan sometimes because we're not used to talking in English at our homes. So एक complex बनना शुरू हो गया. बनता कैसे इसके ऊपर हम बाद में आएंगे. स्कूल में कहते हैं कि जी एक स्पीच करनी है आपने. And I was from city school myself. And I'm told that you have to go home, prepare a speech, and come back tomorrow, give an excellent, speech on the podium. It's an all-boys school. I say, all right, I'll take this opportunity, I'll take this challenge up. I go home. I'm the only person apparently in the whole panel of speakers at that point who decided to write the speech on his own. Did not ask my brother, did not ask my parents, and just wrote something down on my own. It's a speech in Urdu, so I feel I'm comfortable in it. It's a speech day. I arrive. It's an all-boys audience. Some of us who have been in an all-boys school would know how an all-boys audience treats you. Very warm, extremely warm as the sun. I start my speech, and I start with the most basic introduction that we have, which is Assalamu alaikum. You all have been kind enough to just pause and wait for me to listen. My audience was not like this. I receive howls, I receive stares from people, and the noise from the audience is so much as if there's a proper celebration for failure. Something else is happening in my hand, at my end. I'm looking at people, but I can't see faces. I'm hearing noises, but I don't know where it's coming from, and it becomes all hysterical. There's a podium in front of me, my knees drop on the podium, and my face hits the inside of the podium. It's like the greatest fall of Zeus. The podium falls on me. This part of the story is something that I've heard from people. I was unconscious by then. I wake up in my principal's office. She was very kind even then, gave me water and said, it's not a problem. We'll do this again some other time. That's the first support that I got in my life that I remember to this day. 3 years passed away. I stayed away from public speaking events. Every time there was a notice board, somebody would say, are you interested? It became a known thing in the school that Raza is not somebody who will be interested in public speaking. And Raza had also accepted this. Raza believed in the idea that this is not for me. I'll play sports, I'll do well in studies, but this is not my game. 3 years later, I start questioning myself. I'm in 10th grade, boys are growing up, I'm getting taller, and I'm becoming more prominent because the juniors also can easily identify from a distance, he's the boy who crashed 3 years ago. And I asked myself, I have to do something different now. कुछ अलग करना पड़ेगा. Boys में repute वापस लानी पड़ेगी मुझे अपनी. And I asked one of my teachers that I want to sign up for public speaking. It used to be an after-school thing. This is back in 2005. And I said, I want to sign up for this. One of my teachers, Mrs. Naqvi, her was her last name, she came up to me and she said, Raza, are you sure you want to go ahead with this? And I said, yes. I said, why? What's the problem? She said, because students will be asked to come and give a trial. And again, this is going to be in front of an all-school audience. And this is where Raza says, maybe I'm making the wrong decision. Maybe it's not the best decision to make in life. I am confident in life, but I have to go. This is this idea or the conversation that starts in your mind when you're young. That is the conversation that you have with the spirit of an argument, something I labeled my today's speech as. So what is this spirit? And what is this argument? I will complete my story side by side. It's your darkest days when you're young. And that's the point in your life when you start taking complexes in. They start coming from inside. And I started asking myself in those days, okay, I have to tell my teacher tomorrow that I have to do something. A lot of guilt came in. Am I made for this? A lot of shame came in. The last time I remember was me representing my name, my family's name, my friend's name, And every failure in my life was associated with these burdens. So the first conversation that I started in my mind was, should I do this? And let's look at the weights of arguments over here. I talk to my spirit, and that's the one person you talk to. When you talk to yourself, you're talking to your spirit, because that's the most honest version of yourself. And I looked at myself and I say, should I do this? And the first question that comes in is, will I be doing it good enough? Will I be doing an excellent job? Because the idea or the pressure out there is that you have to be here. You cannot survive here. And there's a problem, because if you tilt it this otherwise, people are the same. But we are told that you're supposed to be here and you can't survive over here. So I look around and I ask myself, okay, what are the factors I have to take into account? Parents are going to be upset. That's okay. They're not been really happy with my grades either. So I'm just going to sort of do well with, with my speech. What about my friends? Well, they need something from me. They're happy. There have been times when I've not done I've not done well in sports. So I'm going to take this up. And suddenly I realize in my conversations that at the end of the day, it's going to be me who is going to be responsible for what I do. Because people only jump in when I do well. And when I don't do well in life is when I'm held accountable for it. And this is the reality we all see in life. When you do great, somebody will say, I have some credit to take over here. So I realized very early in my life, in my conversations with myself, that this is my responsibility. Nobody's pushing me to do this, so I have to go ahead. So I asked my teachers, I will sign up for this. And long story short, I ended up winning every parliamentary debate competition that there was in this country. I was enjoying the throne for a long while as well, and then I sort of came out from this. But what are these conversations with your spirit? And what is this argument that you have? And that's what this whole speech is about, because I can only talk to you about my story. This is not a book. There is no thumb rule as to what can make you a good public speaker. It has to be a conversation from yourself. So when we ask people, what is their opinion about public speaking? Most of them will say, well, it's one of the biggest fears of life. It's ranked somewhere around 3rd or 4th, above death, by the way. And then I started asking myself, why really, why would you consume yourself in a way to believe that there's something out there that you will do and will, become a fear? So the first conversation that starts in our life is us telling ourselves, can we do it? But the problem with this conversation is that this is always attached with the weight of what your perception of your ability is. Can is a question of ability. Should is a question of spirit. And that's the small line we're unable to identify when we're young. Can I do it is not the important question. Should I do it? But how do you jump onto questions in your life from can to should? And that's the million-dollar journey. Because we are told from a long, historical perspective that you are only going to do things that you are told to do or what is perceived to be good. So you have to take good grades because, hey, I know my aunt's son is also appearing in the same exams, and when the result comes out, I get a call as well from my aunt saying, my son scored 10 A stars, what about you? So the first perception that happens is, I have to do it because I have to make my parents proud. I have to do it because somebody out there who is competing with me in a world where you did not set the competition, but you've been thrown over there, somebody has to do better than me, or I have to do better than them. And there's this constant struggle when you start growing up of performing, of doing it well. So the first conversation that we need to start having with our spirit is, why should I not think about what I want to do? But this is where the problem happens. A lot of people who are, old over here will say that this, he's being a lunatic over here. He's telling children to go out, be free and do anything that they want. But where does the responsibility come in? Where do you talk about things such as, how will a small child be able to understand what is right or wrong? And that comes from honesty. So what I started doing to myself was that every night I would imagine what would happen tomorrow. And those are the smallest of conversations that I'd have. How I'd wake up, talk to my parents, enter school, meet my friends, greet them, start in class, and conversations started running in my head of how I behave, how I talk to my teachers, how I talk to my friends, how do I do things outside of class. Every night became a conversation with myself where I started becoming the judge of what are my actions and whether they are right or wrong. And you know it. You know it when you're young, that there are consequences to things, there are harms associated with who you are, what you do, but nobody tells you that you can do this on your own, or you can make that choice yourself and figure out or see or discuss what are the pros and cons of this. I started doing this every day. A lot of people today tell me, and they ask me, how are you able to sort of go on the stage and talk right there and then? How are you, able to talk to somebody and have a conversation or say the right things right there and then? And this is where I always tell them, I was not born with it. A lot of those isolated nights with myself, with my spirit, I spent time having conversations with myself. I started talking about what would make this person happy, what would, give this person more comfort. So it was not my responses. It was the answers to my responses that which I had rehearsed long time ago. And I knew exactly what was supposed to be said out of all probabilities that I will face when I will have a conversation with somebody. Be it a job interview, be it me talking to my friends, I knew exactly the outcomes of these conversations. That did not make me smart, because I was spending a lot of time with myself, sometimes self-doubting as well. When I did not have answers, I probably made the wrong choice that night. The next morning I went and I sort of said something I was too frank or candid with my teacher, and there I was standing outside the class. Everybody is seeing what a great example I set for myself, that I just entered my class today and just did not greet my teacher and simply said, why don't you do something interesting today? I thought that's probably a cool thing to say, but it was not. I was sort of told to just stand outside the class. There was a punishment everybody had to serve if they had crossed the line. So I did learn from my experiences as well. All right, today I did not do a good job with my conversation. I have to figure out if this is the consequence, that consequence goes back into my head. But what's this spirit then? How does your spirit work? And what is a spirit? It's a word that most people have sort of, created. People who are into philosophy, and they'll say that there's a thing such as spirit. There's no such, scientific definition of what your spirit is. But your spirit is that one voice in your head that talks to you. How do you hear it? Somebody says, can you come over here? And the way you walk to this person, either you're smiling or you're, going with an angry face, your spirit tells you how to do these things. These are responses in your brain, in your head, in your heart that allow you to talk to yourself and figure out what's right and what's wrong. So how do you work on this? And how do you sort of get on a stage like this? How do you become that person that everybody wants to talk to? Or how do you become that person that everybody wants to talk to and you're okay with not being or you're okay with not having a conversation? The first idea is for you to understand that whatever that you do is not judged by success or failure. That's the most important rule in life. That whatever action that you will take will not turn out to be cool. It will not turn out to be something as bizarre as somebody who's not, willing to talk to somebody. It's not going to be something which will be hated. So whatever that you do will be seen from your spirit. And that's the problem that we have in our society. We don't talk about these things. And this is, where I jump into the second story. When I was doing exceptionally well in public speaking, a lot of people approached to me. And you'll be amazed that I'm not talking about students. I met people at weddings, and somebody would, some uncle came up to me and said, can I meet you tomorrow? I need some help. I go to board meetings, and I'm not able to sort of converse or put my point across. And I was like, okay, I barely have 100 rupees in my, in my pocket. You're somebody who's probably like a millionaire. How am I able to, understand what are your problems or what are the things you have to work on? So I said, okay, fine, I'll go. I met this person the next day. I went to his office, and I started talking to this person about, I actually thought of something which is very unique. I had no book that I had read, and I just realized I had to act as if I can figure this problem out. So I asked this person, do you know all the people who will be in the room? And he says, yeah, there are 6 people, other people on my board who will be there. And I asked, do you know what kind of people they are? And he says, I haven't really thought about it, but they all work under me, so what's the concern over here? I said, there's no concern, just start understanding who you will be attending in the room. And that's how we'll start to talk about it. So he starts talking about who these people are. He has little clue on a few people. And we make a list of what kind of personalities we are seeing in the room. And I say, let's start talking about this. Let's have one question that you have, or let's pick the first question you want to talk about, and we'll sort of, talk and go through every individual that we sort of pointed out, or we have written down, and we'll figure something out how this goes about. This person starts talking about what happens if I talk about this conversation with this person, what happens when I talk about this conversation with this person, and that's where the conversation starts to come in. The person right there in the middle simply tells me, you can go home now. And I said, have you figured something out? He says, I know in my head what I have to talk about. The next day I called this person up. I said, how did the meeting go? He says, it went brilliant. I said, what did you do? He said, I just sat silent over there. And I said, well, technically that's not what I really sort of came in to help you with. And that's where my first understanding of understanding people, better came in. How does that work? How does this spirit allow you to sort of talk about these things? So you just have to do, one thing which is very small. Look around you. Look at somebody who's sitting at your left, sitting at your right, and you can simply ask yourself, what do I do, or how do I start this, start a conversation with the person sitting on my left or my right? And I kid you not, you will start, looking at what they're wearing, how do they look, are they in a happy or a jolly mood, and you will start preparing responses in your head. Those responses are ones coming from your spirit. The problem with this is that you have already you have a preconceived notion in your head that there is a consequence attached to it. There is a consequence, and that can be good or bad, but the consequence is not always going to be the judge of your character or your ability. Your conversations need to start happening elsewhere. They need to start happening in your head without the fear of failure, without the fear of not being looked at as somebody who's cool, not as somebody who's a public speaker, but just somebody who wants to understand what's happening. Your arguments and your spirit are always ahead of you. The only problem is, if they are ahead of you and chained, there's not much that you can do then. So the spirit of the argument is not the essence. It's you in every word you speak. And when you will start believing it like that whatever that I say is a part of me and not just a word that goes to that part of the room or that part of the room, that's when your spirit starts to talk to you and says, get up, you can do it. You don't have to wait for someone to tell you, you are born to be a public speaker. Nobody has the right to tell that to you. Only you have the right to tell you one thing, that you can and you should do it. That's all. Thank you very much.